Record. Welcome everybody, Jason Rozin here again with Troy Aupperle to continue on covering each one of our products in depth and to really cover, Troy, one of your biggest passions, which is educating the world about enzymes. People just know enzymes are important, but of course they always get the question like, how do I use them? A lot of people don't even know the difference between a systemic or a digestive enzyme. And today we are going to cover one of yours and my favorite systemic enzymes, which is our product called SERRAXYM.
Yes.
And yep. Sorry.
I think the most commonly asked question from the layperson is, I've seen something called Serratiopeptidase. I've seen something called Serratiopeptidase. Are those the same thing? And the answer is yes. So hence the product, our product name SERRAXYM. So again, it just highlights this particular proteolytic or systemic enzyme.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the world of enzymes is amazing, but it can certainly be confusing. And I know it's yours and my passion to try to straighten some of these things out. So why don't we get into a little bit of the history of this enzyme Serratio or Serratiopeptidase, and kind of talk about its discovery and some of the things that I know that are really passionate to you.
Yeah, and what's really cool, like with most enzymes, they've been around for a very, very long time. I mean, most people think of vitamins and minerals as being kind of the standard, right? Like they've been around a lot longer, but that's not true. I mean, enzymes have over 100-year history. So with this particular enzyme, it was discovered back in the 1960s and used extensively in Europe as well as in Japan. And again, it had a bunch of different names associated with it. So you could also, Google or look up Danzin or Dasin or Amphlozyme. So there's a couple of different names for that. So it wasn't until 1996 that the enzyme was introduced here in the U.S. So, and since then, I mean, we've seen this enzyme become quite popular. I mean, it's kind of the go-to product, for what it's used for.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of people to, kind of thank for that along the way. I mean, the main researcher was Dr. Hans Nieper, he was a German kind of alternative practitioner. So there's a book, if you want to read more about him, it's called The Curious Man, kind of his life story and what he contributed, and obviously in this particular conversation, super important. I mean, he did a lot of the initial studies that showed, one of the things, if this enzyme was taken every day for 18 months, that it would kind of heal any of the clogged arteries. Essentially, just kind of like a little Pac-Man would go in there and clean that out. So he did all the research to prove that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's just another one of these enzymes that it does so many different things. I've read articles like the 40 top things that, Serratio or Serratiopeptidase can do. But the one thing I try to drive home for people is it likes consuming, things that aren't alive or aren't supposed to be there. So it's like just a awesome player for scar tissue. And like you're talking about, like calcification of the arteries, which comes from scar tissue. So it's just got so many different uses, and proteins that the body recognizes as not being alive is just a nice player for that. And our livers are so scarred up from high fructose corn syrup, it's another just nice player for that. We probably need to take it more like for 24 months, given how toxic society has been since Hans's days. But yeah, definitely is a very cool enzyme.
Yeah, and then the second researcher that put out a really nice book was called "The Miracle Enzyme is Serratiopeptidase." So that was put out by Robert Redfern, and it's kind of more of the 30,000-foot approach. And so he covers all the research from all the people, from Hans Nieper all the way on down. So very good reference and resource book if you can get a hold of that.
Yeah, fantastic. So why don't we talk a little bit about more like of the function and how this guy works? I know I touched a little bit on that, and maybe you could go a little bit more into depth on that.
Yeah, that's because kind of going back to Hans Nieper. I mean, he was kind of obviously fascinated with this particular enzyme, and it's a natural enzyme produced by a Serratiopeptidase that lives in silkworms. So this is the kind of the history or the background. So once the silkworm has completed its transformation into a moth, it uses this particular enzyme to melt, right, a hole in its cocoon so that it can escape. So again, very, very particular, specific application. And you mentioned that earlier in regards to non-living tissue. So again, it didn't harm anything that was living. It just ate a hole through what it needed to so it could escape. So I think for that reason, he kind of linked those things together and basically said that Serratiopeptidase is, that's what kind of makes it unique, that it affects only non-living tissue. So like if we look at, he's mentioning Serratiopeptidase in his studies, dissolved dead tissue such as old fibrous layers that clog the lining of our arteries and dangerously restrict the blood flow and oxygen to the brain. So, incredibly important from that perspective, because he's saying even, and again, most of the enzymes are incredibly important, pre and post surgery. So he wasn't, against that. He was just saying that, like if you can take the enzyme before that to help break up some of the things, they'll go in and do some kind of angioplasty, right? And then if you want that stuff to not build up again, because that's what happens, right? People go in for a surgery, they get it cleaned out, and then maybe it took them 10 years to build up to that. Well, then the next time they go in, it could be half that time or a third that time or even a fifth that time. 2 years later, their arteries are plugged up again. So this is one of those enzymes that could, like little Pac-Man, keep that clean so you don't have to go back, for another surgery.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, a lot of the doctors we work with obviously try to get their patients to avoid the surgery, but sometimes it's necessary. And like you said, the biggest thing is, okay, do we want this problem to come back again? And this is where this guy can just come in and really give people a really high quality of life after they have to go through something like that.
Yeah, and then people are always asking too, like, what, how does it work? So I always like to just mention kind of the three main ways, for this particular enzyme, and it has some similarities to other proteolytic enzymes, obviously, but with this one, it does three things. So the first thing it's going to do, it breaks down the insoluble protein byproducts of blood coagulation, so that's known as fibrin. And number two, it thins the blood. So again, this facilitates the drainage and speeds up the entire kind of repair process. Yep. And the third thing, it alleviates pain by inhibiting the release of specific amines called bradykinin. So between those three things, it's very, very effective, and we'll talk about the some of the studies and clinicals that they did, to prove that.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
And you can go, I mean, that's why I love the internet, right? Because now you can just jump on there and say, hey, if you go to PubMed, you can type in serrapeptase or Serratiopeptidase, either one, I suppose. It'll bring up 80 different results or findings or clinical studies so that you can take a look at those. We're just going to talk about three of them real briefly. Okay. And then, if you want to do some further research or confirm that, you can jump on that website. Yep. So I think one of the earlier ones was a double-blind study, German state hospital, 66 patients, fresh rupture of a lateral ligament treated surgically. They were divided into three groups. The group receiving the test substance, the swelling had decreased by 50% on the third post-operative day, while the other two control groups, no reduction in swelling had occurred at that time. Like, I tell people that all the time, that enzymes will cut recuperation time in half. So here's just a great example of that. I mean, can
Right.
you imagine coming out of surgery and like the drugs that they give you, the pain that you're experiencing, that within 3 days, I mean, it's half gone already. I'm like, that's nothing short of miraculous.
Absolutely.
Um, and I'm going to just mention this. So the therapeutic dose for that was 1 to 2 tablets of 5 milligrams each tablet 3 times a day. So again, going back to this isn't like you need to consume large quantities. Enzymes are incredibly effective and efficient, in very small
Right.
doses.
And how would you like, if you could like give maybe people an example? Of course, enzymes aren't measured in milligrams. Maybe like how many units would that be equivalent to, um, compared to what's in, for example, our label, which we'll get more into as we move here.
Yeah, that's a great question. So and again, I don't the activity or the concentrates that were available back then were probably less. But if we were
Right.
just to compare, for example, apples to apples, I mean, the dosage here would probably be like 10 to 20,000 units a day,
Wow.
or per dose, right?
Per
So I mean,
dose.
he's taking 2 tablets, so the most would be 20,000, and then you take it 3 times a day, so it'd be 60,000 total for the day.
Right. And then in
Yeah.
one of our capsules, which we'll touch in a minute, there's more than that.
Yes. Yep. So the second study we're going to talk about is just another double-blind study, evaluated as a group of 70 patients with evidence of cystic breast disease. So randomly divided into a treatment group and a placebo group. This serratiopeptidase was noted to be superior in placebo for improvement of breast pain, breast swelling. In almost 86% of the patients receiving serratiopeptidase reported marked improvement. And here's another important thing with enzymes in general: no adverse reactions were reported. So no side effects, no toxicity, no contraindications. So very, very widely used and accepted by most people. Okay, then the last study we'll look at, again, these are all double-blind studies. This was larger, 193 patients suffering from acute or chronic ear, nose, throat disorders. So lots of that,
Right.
lots of patients experiencing that today. So treatment lasted 7 to 8 days. Again, 5 milligram tablets 3 times a day. So now you're essentially down to half that dosage, or 10,000 units a day for a week. So after 3 to 4 days, significant symptom regression was observed in the serratiopeptidase group, while it was not noted in the control group. So again, patients suffering from all of those issues, including sinusitis, noted marked rapid improvements. Physicians' assessment of the efficacy of the treatment were excellent or good for almost 98% of the patients treated, compared with only 22% with the placebo. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's no joke results.
Yeah, so these are, off the charts. I mean, most, when a pharmaceutical company introduces a new drug, I mean, if they see a 5% increase or change, and it's astounding. So here, just to see that, the 50% reduction within 3 days, and that there's no side effects. I mean, this is a clean, avenue or route to take, right? Like no risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't beat it. And one of the things I like clinically is, it kind of goes back to that last study, 86%. I would say at least 80% of people who go on some kind of enzyme protocol, they notice something. Whether it be, just something, they notice a difference. And I just love that, especially when our doctors have to get a patient ready for care, to actually see and notice a change, rapidly when they're going into a new protocol. It boosts their confidence in what the doctor's trying to do, and it just helps everybody out. I love that about enzymes.
Yeah, and speaking of confidence, so that kind of takes us into the next category here. We're going to talk about sourcing for a minute because
Yeah.
I think that's the single biggest issue with this enzyme. I know it is. I mean, supplying enzymes for over 23 years. It's I've seen a lot of things behind the scenes, and one of the most disturbing or just disappointing was the recall of 2014. So this was ubiquitous across the planet. All countries were affected that used enzymes, and the source of this recall went back to India. So they were during their fermentation process, the bug or plate count, TPC, total plate count, or aerobic plate count, was too high. So they administered a synthetic antibiotic into the batch to knock the bugs down. Which, whatever. I mean, you do what you got to do. I understand that, but
It's
the only
yeah,
bad part,
pretty
the only
drastic.
bad,
Yeah.
the only bad part of that is that, the antibiotic that they chose is the dosage. It's illegal in most countries, and the threshold, I think, is like, what was it? It was like 0.6 parts per billion. So,
Wow.
I mean, it's not parts per million, it's parts per billion. So when obviously I think it was the pet industry that tested the enzyme and found, that it was, I mean, probably 10 or 100 times over that quantity. So they did an immediate recall, and then that triggered a bunch of different industries. So again, it just kind of points back to the fact that with this particular enzyme, 95+% of this enzyme is sourcred from India.
Still to this day. Even
Still to
after
this
the
day.
the
Yep.
what's the antibiotic called again?
Chloramphenicol.
Chloramphenicol, that's right.
So now what's required from the manufacturer and raw material perspective is that every single enzyme coming out of India has to be tested for chloramphenicol, or nobody will buy it. So there is that mechanism in place, but just again, not real reassuring. There are other issues with enzymes that are coming out of India. One is their ability to control the odor or the smell of the enzyme. So sometimes you'll see that might be a telltale sign if you open up a bottle that you purchased somewhere else, and it's got like this foul, nasty odor, right? Like somebody didn't take their shoes off for 6 months, right?
Yep.
And ran 20 marathons. Really bad. So that's one of the issues. Obviously, the plate count, I mean, that still is something that's an issue, because obviously they can't use chloramphenicol anymore.
Yep.
So,
right.
And then the last thing is just the activity of the enzymes. I mean, those kind of are still not real standardized. They're a little bit all over the board. So these are great reasons why we just said, hey, we need a better solution. We need a better mousetrap here. So, going back, there's one source. It's a pharmaceutical company that does produce this out of South Korea. So that's the only source that we use for this particular enzyme. So again, going back to just being confident, because like in real estate, it's location. Well, with enzymes, it's sourcing.
Absolutely.
If you don't know your source, and you're kind of especially as a professional, right? That people come to, and a practitioner. I mean, that's a huge risk. I mean, something I would never, ever recommend something that if I didn't know where it came from, right, and was reassured that there are mechanisms in place to make sure that it's good for my patient.
Absolutely. And I know you and I have even tested, just for curiosity's sake, some enzymes from some other top companies around, just to see, what's in them. And we've been kind of blown away because these people have a reputation for sourcing things so cleanly. And then we found things in even their enzymes. So, it's scary. I mean, people just don't understand enzymes. I mean, it is really, like you said, super important to know your source and understand, what they do. These things are alive, and they need to be respected and understood.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing because it's super important. I mean, we manufacture 100% of our enzymes, right? That's why we can say what we say, and that's not the case in the industry. If you look at there are dozens, if not hundreds, of companies that do not do their own manufacturing. And that's one of the things you need to ask them. That's probably the first question you ask them. You walk up to their booth and say, hey, do you guys manufacture 100% of your own products? And if they say no, then keep walking, right, until you find somebody that says yes.
Yeah.
Because this is where they get into trouble. They're relying on a third-party contract manufacturer to source their enzymes. So what's that third-party contract manufacturer interested in? Their profits. I mean, they know nothing about enzymes. They don't specialize in enzymes. So they go search out in the market and go, hey, there's some stuff from India. It's, it's X amount. I mean, it's half the price of this other stuff. Let's buy it.
Yep.
That's always going to happen that way. That's just the nature of business and how people operate. So, until you are dealing with a company that does only enzymes and sources 100% of their enzymes and manufactures 100% of their enzymes, I don't think there is another company out there besides us.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. All right.
Okay, I think we got that point handled.
I think so too. All right, so let's pop over to dose. We touched a little bit on dose, and let's talk about dose and how much we packed into just one capsule, and maybe talk a little bit about how to sift through how confusing labels can be, especially in the enzyme industry.
Yeah, like we mentioned, those studies, which were awesome studies, double-blind studies with groups from 66 to 193 people, using 10 to 20,000 units of activity per day, per dose, or up to 60,000 a day. So now, we come along here, we're putting in 150,000 units in one single capsule. So again, we want to make it simple, right, for the docs, as well as compliance with from their patients.
Yep.
That if they can just take one capsule a day and it's done, I mean, that's awesome. So that's kind of the point behind this. And also, like you mentioned, a lot of these other companies, and these aren't small companies. I mean, these are very well-known, respected companies. If you look at their label, I mean, it'll say proprietary enzyme blend. And it'll list, it usually lists serratiopeptidase or serratiopeptidase. It'll list, like a bromelain, papain, amla, and a few other things. So those are
no activity units.
Yeah, there's no activity units. And sometimes there's not even milligrams. So it might say, that there's 500 milligrams per capsule and that's it. But that tells you nothing. I mean, that's like, if you're drag racing somebody else and, you can't look under their hood or they won't tell you what the horsepower is of the car that you're racing. It's like you have no idea what you're up against. And the same thing here. It's a guessing game. And we've done that. I mean, as far as from the manufacturing side, we will buy an enzyme, bring it in house, and we'll assay it, and we'll look, and it's like, wow, it's really disappointing because some of these companies will the serratiopeptidase activities are more like the old ones. I mean, they're around that 20,000 unit per capsule range. So that's pretty common for those proprietary blends. So, again, you'd have to take, 7 to 8 capsules to get of those just to get what's in one of ours. And again, going back to the sourcing, that's we already discussed that. So
yeah, absolutely. And then another thing to watch out for is the serving size. A lot of times, if they do list their activity units, those serving size will be 2 capsules, so their numbers get boosted a little bit
yes.
in the column. So it's another thing to just be really careful for when you're trying to compare your enzyme, to another one. So I guess another thing that we should discuss is the type of capsule that's used for serratiopeptidase, and why it's so important for it to get through the stomach into the small intestine so it can enter the bloodstream.
Yeah, and there are 2 options to that. So I mean, some companies will do will take the powder and enteric coat it. So they just essentially surround each enzyme with a little coating, like a little M&M,
right,
or a bead or a
BB.
pearl.
Yeah,
a little BB. So that does the job. There is some die off in that because it's a heat. There's heat involved in that process. So I haven't been a super big fan of enteric coated enzymes. The other option, this is fairly recent again in the history of enzymes, just in the last few years that delayed release or acid resistant capsules have come into the market, but much more effective and clinically proven that you put the enzymes in there, it'll travel through the stomach acid, release its contents in the upper portion of the intestinal tract. So that's exactly what we want to do. And that's why we use, and you'll see that in every single systemic enzyme that we offer, it'll be in that DR acid resistant capsule.
Yep, absolutely. And just
yep. So if you see it in just a regular veg cap or a gelatin cap and it's not enteric-coated, doesn't mention that in the literature or the label, don't buy it.
Yep, absolutely. You'd be wasting a lot of your patient's money.
Yep.
And just for those people that might be their first video that they're listening to, systemic enzymes are very important to be taken away from food for exactly the reasons we're talking about, the reason it's in the capsule. A nice thing about our products is they're so heavily dosed that it's easy for the patient just to take them in the evening and then in the morning, so they don't have to worry about trying to remember to take something in the middle of the day. So just another nice feature about what we're trying to do here. Okay, so we've got a few other players in here, and the next one we'd like to talk about is Catalase. So another just wonderful another wonderful enzyme that's just a great friend to just about any systemic enzyme, and we use it in every systemic enzyme blend. So Troy, why don't you talk a little bit about Catalase and this powerful antioxidant?
Yeah, so what we mentioned earlier that the capsule, right, the capsule size and the concentration of enzymes that are available today are very dense. So they're only going to take up a certain percentage of the capsule space. And what you'll find with most other companies, you'll see maltodextrin, you'll see tapioca dextrin, you'll see MCC, you'll see a whole bunch of different things that people use as fillers or dilutants. So we don't do that. So that's one of the things we decided early on that, and I've always been a believer of that as far as I call it the purity. I mean, the purity in regards to what's in the capsule. So we want to give you as much and as many enzymes as possible. So that's why instead of putting the fillers, we put Catalase in there. And this is also referred to as an antioxidant enzyme. So what it does specifically is just it breaks down or decomposes hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. So why is that important? I mean, if we look at the amount of stress, right, free radical damage, all the stuff that's going on in the body that we're subject to today, I mean, this is huge as far as maybe more from obviously it breaks that down and converts it into things that the body can use.
Yep.
But it's also, I think it's going to be a huge part of the whole anti-aging.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And this is also one of the most prolific enzymes known to the human, species. As it's mind-boggling what this enzyme can do. So one Catalase enzyme can break down up to somewhere between 5 and 40 million bonds every second.
Yeah.
So
that's insane.
Most enzymes will be in the the thousands, right? They can break down thousands of bonds in a second, but to be able to break down millions of bonds in a second, it's people don't stop and think about that. It's almost in the world of like fairy tales or magic.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, you just wave your wand and poof, that's done. It's like, I mean, nobody has any idea how it does that, right? Really, but it's awesome. So that's why, again, it serves as a dual purpose in all of our products. I mean, there's a reason why it's in there, and it's incredibly effective. So whatever space is left in the capsule, that's what fills it up.
And just kind of, since we're talking a little about some kind of fun stuff, is I think I read somewhere, like, isn't Catalase, or I know there's an enzyme huge release that happens when you're about to get in like a massive car accident or something, or people to say they like time just stopped, where some big event is about to happen, and that's an enzyme related function, isn't it?
It is. I'd have to do a little bit more research on that to see if there's a specific or specific enzymes that are involved in that process. But you're right. I mean, that goes into a whole, obviously very fun topic, right? As
Right.
far as because
We're
the
gonna build
enzymes.
our time machine soon, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm just kidding. Enzyme time machine, right?
Uh,
That's
yeah. So I think
2018's project. No.
what
But anyway, just another fun fact. I know we just like talking about that kind of fun stuff. Okay, so Catalase, just another wonderful player. You'll find it in all of our systemic enzymes. Okay, and last but not least, we've got our enzyme Energized mineral blend. Huge passionate topic of yours, also called AstraZyme. I know we've done entire, over an hour webinar just on this alone. But Troy, could you just kind of maybe touch briefly on this guy and this is one of our trademarked, signatures that we put on most of our products.
Yeah, so this goes back to the fact that enzymes work in conjunction with minerals. So, and minerals kind of help, it's almost like a lock and key. So the minerals will unlock the full potential of the enzymes. Do enzymes work without minerals? Yes, they do, but not as effectively, right? You're not going to see the same results with enzymes as with enzymes with minerals. And it's not meant as a mineral supplement or replacement. We're talking very small amounts. In this capsule, I believe there are 10 milligrams, and these are trace minerals. So there are 72 trace minerals in here. The unique composition or structure of this mineral is very, very unique. And again, it was no accident that this was and has been a part of our kind of protocol from day one. So we know that enzymes are tetrahedron structures, four-sided pyramids, three faces and a base. This mineral is exactly the same geometric pattern. So they're tetrahedrons, and they also have another function. So besides delivering all the trace minerals for the enzymes to use, once it delivers that, then it's basically like a truck that goes out to New York and drops off its load. Well, on its way back, it might as well be taking something back. So these are little, essentially microscopic sponges, right? That will, like sieves, that will suck up any toxins and then pull that out of the body. So on their way out. So again, a nice dual function there. Incredibly, incredibly important. And most people are mineral deficient today. So if you look at 90% of the enzymes being sold in the market today, they don't contain minerals. So
Right.
are they going to work as effective? No. I mean, they're kind of assuming
That
that
you have
you
enough,
have those
right?
minerals in your body, and
Yeah.
bad assumption today.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. So if you guys are interested in hearing more about this, we did a really extensive webinar that's on our site about it. That's titled AstraZyme, where we have some real fun talking about this guy and the studies that have been done on it. So yeah, so just to kind of wrap up here, we've got lots of information on our websites. If you just if this is something you first heard, docs, just click on request an account. You can get access to the back of our website to check out some more of the studies and some of the videos Troy and I have done. And if you're interested in learning more about the clinical applications and questions, you can just email me right here. And yes, thanks so much for joining us. And we hope to catch you on our next broadcast.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.